Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today, where we will cover some best practices for leveraging Microsoft Project Online's new resource engagements feature, so you can better understand capacity and demand across your organization. Before we get started, we have a few quick logistics to go over with you. First, we are not going to open the line for questions, so the lines are going to be muted. However, we will pause for questions that are captured in the chat and the question panel throughout today's presentation, should you have any. You can also feel free to email us directly, and we will be happy to answer your questions as well. We will be giving you our contact information as we get into the introductions. And if you get pulled away or distracted during the webinar, don't worry, we will be distributing the recording of today's presentation to all of the registrants following the webinar. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bridget for introductions.
Thanks, Michelle. My name is Bridget Fleming, and also today we're going to be joined by Matt Willey, who's our activity product guru. And as Michelle said, today we're going to talk about the new resource engagements feature. First, I will be describing the process and some of the decisions that need to be made before you implement resource engagements. Then I'm going to cover at a high level the steps involved in working with resource engagements from both the resource manager's perspective and the project manager's perspective. After that, Matt's going to do a demonstration of the features in Project Online and show you some great reports that can really help you make use of your resource engagement information. Resource engagements help you formalize and document your resource agreements. They provide resource managers with both summary and detailed visibility to the commitments for their resources. Resource managers can respond to requests and provide the right resource that has the needed availability for a project. For project managers, resource engagements provide a documented agreement for resource availability for their project. Resource engagements can provide an organization with the ability to do long-range planning at a high level to support portfolio management and decision-making. It's important to get your processes defined for this feature up front because it really does impact the entire organization. Because both project managers and resource managers are involved, it's critical that the method, criteria, and timing for requesting and approving resources is well understood. One of the first things that needs to be decided is whether resource engagements will be used for near-term negotiation of resource time, long-range planning, or both. What is the time window for requesting resources? Should they be requested a week before they are needed or a month before they are needed? If you're doing long-range planning, should requests be approved immediately? Another consideration is how you are managing resources. Are project managers submitting requests for generic resources, and then these will be replaced by the resource managers with named resources? Or can the project managers request specific named resources? And then finally, which resources in your organization do you want to require engagements for? Will they be required for all resources or only for your most critical ones? The resource engagement process includes steps for both the resource managers and the project managers. The resource manager will specify which resources require engagements. This is done in the Resource Center as part of the resource definition. Once this is set up for an individual resource, it will not need to be done again unless there's a change in whether that resource needs engagements. You should have guidelines that determine which kinds of resources will require engagements. Check with your PMO or administrator to find out what the guidelines are for your organization. Then project managers will create resource engagements for the resources to work on their projects. The project manager will create and submit an engagement request for each needed resource that requires one. The project must be published before engagement requests can be created. Depending on the processes defined for your particular organization, not all resources may require engagements. All submitted resource requests will be visible to the resource manager in PWA. Once the engagement requests are submitted, then the resource manager reviews the requests and analyzes the availability of the requested resources during the time asked for. The resource manager will respond to the request in one of three ways: accepted, edited and accepted, or rejected. If the resource has the availability requested during the time frame needed, the resource manager may accept the request just as it was submitted. The project manager may then assign the resources to tasks, or if they're already assigned, they will see that the indicators identifying resource engagements needed are no longer visible. If the resource is not available as requested, the resource manager may edit the resource engagement request. The resource manager may edit the start date, the finish date, the units or work hours requested, or they may replace the requested resource with an alternate resource. If the project manager submitted a request for a generic resource, the resource manager will edit the request and identify the specific person that will be assigned to the project. Then the resource manager will accept the edited engagement. Once it's accepted, the project manager then reviews the edited engagement information to determine if these new parameters work for their project. If yes, the project manager may go ahead and assign the resources to tasks and make any other adjustments needed to fit the new engagement information. If no, the project manager may modify and resubmit the engagement request. The third option for the resource manager is to reject the request. The project manager may then edit the engagement request or create a new engagement request and submit it. These are ongoing processes throughout the project. First, we'll look at the steps that the resource manager needs to perform to identify which resources require engagements. As I described, the first step for the resource manager is to specify in the resource definition that resource engagements are needed. This is done in the Resource Center for any resources that need resource engagement requests. In the Resource Center, the resource manager selects the checkbox next to the resource name and clicks on Edit. One of the assignment attributes for the resource is a checkbox indicating that the resource requires approval for all project assignments. By checking this box, the resource will be identified to project managers as needing an engagement request submitted when the resource is assigned to a task. You may also set the assignment attributes for multiple resources at a time by selecting checkboxes next to all of the resources that you want to set and clicking on the bulk edit. Resource managers may also request that reminders be sent to them when resource engagement requests are submitted. There are two steps to this. In the Resource Center, select the checkboxes next to the resources that you want to receive reminders for. Then click the Request Reminders button and select Subscribe to Selected Resources in the drop-down box. This will set up reminders when resource engagements are requested for any of the resources that you had selected. A message box will be displayed letting you know that your subscriptions have been updated. The last step in setting up these reminders is to access Manage My Resources alerts and reminders. This is done under Server Settings, which can be accessed by selecting PWA Settings on the Settings menu or by accessing Server Settings on the Quick Launch menu if it's visible. In the Manage My Resources alerts and reminders settings under the resource requests, click checkbox next to send a reminder about pending resource requests, and then specify the frequency that you want for those requests to come to you. The resource setup process is complete. You've identified which resources require resource engagements from the project managers, and you've also specified whether or not you want to receive reminders about the resource engagement requests. As a project manager, you may be starting off with a project in a number of different states. You may have created a brand new blank project with no tasks in it. Or you may be working with a project built from a template that includes tasks and generic resources. Or you may have a fully developed project schedule with tasks and generic or named resources. If you're working with an existing project, there are indicators that will provide information about needed and existing resource engagement requests. If a resource that requires engagements is assigned to a task and there is no engagement request that covers the resource assignment, an indicator is displayed in the indicator column as shown. This tells you that one or more of the resources assigned to this task needs an engagement. If a resource that requires engagements is assigned to a task and there's a proposed engagement request, This is the indicator that will be displayed. This tells you that any resources that require assignments have proposed engagements that have not yet been committed to. If you hover your mouse over the indicator, it will tell you that an engagement is needed and that you can right-click to fix it. When you right-click, one of the options is to fix in the engagement inspector. If you select this option, you will be guided through various steps, and Matt will show us this in the demo. You may also select to view the assignment in the task usage view. In the task usage view, any assignment that needs an engagement request submitted will have a wavy red line under it. To create a resource engagement, access the Resource Plan view, and on the Resource tab, select the Add Engagement button. The Engagement Information dialog box is displayed. Here you specify the resource, the start and finish dates for the engagement, and either the units or the work hours that you are requesting. You can also include a description and any comments needed. You can see the engagements in the Resource Plan view. It shows the engagement status as draft. There's no visibility yet in PWA to this information. In this example, I inserted rows for work and proposed work. By doing this, I'm able to copy the work values, which have been calculated based on task assignments, and paste that into the proposed work rows below. You can see here that the work has been pasted into the proposed work row. Now I'm able to request the exact hours that I need for the resource. The next part of the engagement request process is to submit the engagements. Select one or more engagements and then submit the resource engagement request by selecting Submit under the Engagements tab. And then you can select either Submit All Engagements or Submit Selected Engagements. The engagement status for the engagement is now set to Proposed. These resource engagements are now visible for the Resource Manager in PWA. On an ongoing basis, the Resource Manager will be receiving these resource requests from the project managers that want to assign resources to their projects. The Resource Manager can view current requests by accessing the Resource Center, selecting the checkbox next to the resources that they want to view engagement requests for, and then selecting Resource Requests. A list of resource requests and the current status for each is displayed for the selected resources. By default, the information is displayed in a sheet format. You may also filter or group the data in any way you want to help with your analysis. You may also view the data in a time-phased format. The Options tab can be used to specify the date range that's visible, as well as the work units and time scale that you want to display, and also whether proposed work should be shown. The Resource Manager will analyze each engagement request received. One of the views available is accessed by selecting Capacity Planning. Here we're viewing the Capacity Engagements heat map under the Capacity Planning option. We have the option in Filters to modify the work unit and timescale, as well as to specify whether we want to include proposed engagements that have not yet been committed. In the Capacity Engagements heat map, blue indicates that a resource is underutilized during the time frame, red indicates that the resource is overutilized during the time frame, and green indicates that the resource falls within the thresholds identified. Matt will cover this in more detail in the demo. Analysis is being performed by the Resource Manager, and decisions are being made about whether to accept, edit and accept, or reject resource requests. The Resource Manager should make sure to provide comments back to the project managers when needed to explain the decisions that were made. The Resource Manager may also create a brand new resource engagement. From the Resource Center, select Resource Requests from the Resources tab. The resource that the resource engagement is being created for must be selected in the Resource Center prior to selecting Resource Requests to be included. Then from the Engagements tab, select Add Engagement. The information that the Resource Manager enters is the same as the Project Manager with one exception. The Resource Manager must also identify what project the engagement is for. Finally, the Project Manager will review the responses that the Resource Manager has provided. One of the things that the Resource Manager may do is replace a generic resource request with a specific named resource for the project. The resource provided may be a new member of the Project Manager's team. This new resource is automatically added to the resource sheet. If new resources have been committed to a project that are not already in the resource sheet, a message banner is displayed above the Gantt chart when the project is open. If you click View Engagements, the resource plan view is shown. When the project manager views the resource plan and hovers his cursor over the indicator, the message tells him that this engagement was created by a resource manager. During project execution, there may be times when a resource that has been committed to your project completes the needed work prior to the finish date of the engagement. You may release a resource early from the engagement by editing the finish date and submitting the request. Make sure to include a comment for the resource manager. You can also delete an engagement request if needed. An engagement request can be deleted no matter what the status is. To delete it, right-click on the engagement and select Delete Engagement from the list. The engagement request will be deleted and is no longer visible to the resource manager. Check to make sure that your internal company procedures allow this to be done. So now I'm going to hand it over to Matt, and he is going to walk you through in Project Online these features.
Perfect, thank you.
Matt, you want to grab it?
Yep, yep. All right, so you all should see my screen in just a second. And what we're looking at is I'm logged into Project Online, and I'm in the Resource Center. So within the Resource Center, we can see all the different resources that we've entered into the system. This is across, all the different resources that I have available to me. When I come in, you can set it up so that a resource manager only sees their resources, or they can see all resources across the entire department or across the entire organization, whatever it might be within the system, that type of thing. And so when I come in, I'm going to pop open one of these resources. I'm going to pop open Amy here and go ahead and say Edit. And I'm looking at Amy, and I can see there's different information set up. Some of the key information is, one thing is, does this resource require approval for assignments? So this is where you can say, does this person have to have an engagement, right? If this person does have to have an engagement, you can't use them in your schedule. It's going to give you that little warning that Bridget was showing, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. If they don't require approval, let's say that they're more of like a support resource and they're kind of on and off doing a little bit here and a little bit there, and we don't want to go through the full resource management process with them, then you have the option of doing that as well. So resources that are in high demand that you want to manage more at a more, say, detailed level and make sure that they're approved before they start working on different projects and things, you can do that, whereas other ones you don't necessarily have to, that type of a thing. You also set up, what are their working hours, what calendar are they related to. So if you have people in multiple different regions with different holidays and things of that nature, then you can account for that. And you also have a current max units here. So what that's saying is, how much is this person available for project work? We can automatically off the top say 25% of the time is going to meetings and admin type of time and things like that. So basically when you set all this up, this is how we know how available a particular person is within a particular period of time. So when we're doing the resource planning and seeing who's available and such, it takes all that into account, as well as who requires a resource engagement, basically who requires the resource to be approved before we can use them on a particular project. Also, you can go and you can set alerts. So when we're going through this whole process, there's alerts that will be generated if you choose to turn those on when a resource is asked for, that type of a thing. When someone goes and says, yep, I need this resource for this particular project, you can have the resource manager get notifications and those types of things. So now jumping into my projects area of my demo, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up Microsoft Project, and that's where you currently build out your resource plan. So to do that, I'll pop up Project here. And we can see that I've already started building out my resource plan. And what I'm doing is I'm using generic resources. So there's a new view in here called the resource plan view. You have your normal view over here like the Gantt charts and all of that as well. But when you come in and you want to build your resource plan, you go to this resource plan view. You're going to build your team first, and that's what's going to put these different resources in here. Again, at this point, most people use generics, but you could be using actual named resources if in your organization, or for this particular project, you already have a sense of who might be working on the project. But generally, you're going to use the different generic resources here. And it's just to say, you know what, I'm going to need 2 developers for this project, I'm going to need a QA, I'm going to need a trainer, you know, those types of things. So let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to request a developer. So I come in, I select my developer row here, and then I'm going to click on engagement, and I'm going to say add engagement. Once I do that, I'm going to put in a description around that particular engagement. So for example, I need them to write HTML. I'll pick a start date and a finish date. So I'm going to need them starting around June of 2016, and I'm going to finish with them around September, let's say. Then when you put in the engagement, you can say, I need them 100% of the time, or I only need them 50% of the time. If you need multiple people, you could put in, I want 200% of a developer, that type of thing. But you also have the option to do it in hours. So I can come in here and say, I'm going to need them about 120 hours over that period of time, or whatever it might be. I generally use units just because it's a little easier. It calculates all the hours for you based off of the holidays and all that. So let's say we just need 1 full-time developer, 100%. And then I can put in any other comments I want here and say, okay. So now I've created my engagement. And when I look over on the right, notice it calculated the hours for me. If I want to, though, I can update my view and I can look at it in percent still. So you have the option to switch back and forth and look at it however you want. You can do a lot of different things in the view to see this. For example, right now I'm looking at it by month, but maybe I don't want to plan by month. I want to plan more by quarter. I can come in here and I can switch at any point to by quarter or by year or by week, you know, whatever makes the most sense for the level of detail that we need to be able to do the high-level resource planning that we're looking to do and get these resources assigned to a particular project. Once it's in here, though, you can also update this. It's an editable spreadsheet at this point. So I can come in and go, you know what, in July, I'm actually only going to need you 75%. And in September, we're going to be winding down. I'll probably only need you about 50%, that type of a thing. So you can come back and make updates and, you know, copy and paste and move things around, do whatever you need to do in there. So you just keep working on that. You'd put in all of your different engagements for the different resources that you need, the different requests, basically. And then once you're done, you're going to submit those, and that's what's going to push it over to the resource manager, generate those notifications. And we're going to go take a look right now from a resource manager perspective how that works and how you can see who's available and assign those resources and such. So let's go ahead and jump back into here then. I'm going to go into my resource pool. So back into the resource pool here, I can select all the different resources that I want to view the request for. So let's say I'm the resource manager for all the business analysts. I want to come in and see who's being, or how many business analysts are being requested for what period of time, and then see who's available and assign them to those particular projects, that type of thing, fulfill those requests. If I wanted to look at more, I could select more down here. It's just based off of whatever you select within this view. So I've selected all the business analysts. I'm going to click on resource requests, and that'll take me into the resource request view here. The way I have my view set up is first it shows me all the ones that I've already committed. So these are all the requests that I've already gone through and assigned people for, that type of a thing. But what I can do is I can collapse that really easily and then just look at here are all my proposed requests to kind of get that out of the way. But if I ever need that information, I can come get it. And if I maybe need to update something, you know, someone is going on vacation for an extended period of time, or someone quit, you know, we need to switch them with another resource, right? I can always get to those committed ones if I need to make adjustments. But right now I'm just looking at proposed. So I see, okay, 2 business analysts are being asked for. There's a description of what's needed, the project they're needed for, the requester, and there's some other information over here, the percent that they're needed at, and the start date and finish date. It gives you lots of information in here. And then over on the right, if I drag this guy over, then I can see more details about how many hours and whatever period of time. And there's different view options in here right now. I'm looking at it by hours, but I could do it by days. I'm looking at it by months, but I could do it by weeks or quarters or years. I mean, you have lots of options of how you want to look at this information. But the point is, I can now come in and see who's being asked for what period of time, and how much time we're going to need them for. And so now I can flip over to my capacity planning view, and that's how I'm going to see who's available and who's already overbooked, and those types of things. So I can see very quickly in the red, all those people are over allocated within those particular periods of time, and I'm looking at this by month right now. If they're green, that means that they're being utilized properly. We have them fully booked but not overbooked, so we're getting kind of the most bang out of our buck. We're utilizing those resources properly. If they're blue, what that's saying is that we haven't utilized them enough. And you can see down here, for example, Yukari doesn't have anything assigned to her within this period of time, so we're going to have to get Yukari some work. So then going back into my resource requests, pop back into there, and I now know who's available and who's not, and I can come in and I can say, okay, for this first one, we're going to assign that to Yukari, and just switch that there. Good to go. I can then accept that, and that'll send that notification back to the project manager so that when they come back into project, or they'll get a notification, they'll see that little bar there, and it'll say, hey, you've been given a resource that you've been asked for, that type of thing, and you can see the details of what was given to you and such. If it was rejected, then it'll say that, and you'll have to kind of propose something else. So it'll facilitate that whole negotiation type process back and forth between the resource manager and the project manager in that sense. So then jumping into my project schedule, so now I've built my high-level resource plan, and I have got some different resources assigned to my particular project. Now, what's really cool is when you're building out your project schedule, that it shows this little icon over here. It says an assignment is needed for this, or an assignment for this task needs an engagement, meaning the resource assigned, in this case I'm still using generics, but we would change them to named resources as they were coming in. There's kind of a nice find and replace function that lets you switch them all out really quickly. But what it's saying is we don't have an engagement that's yet approved for this particular period of time that this task falls within. So you can use this then to go and fix those problems, and the way you can fix those problems, it's going to give you some different options. It's saying you can create a new engagement, you can assign the task to a different resource who you already have an engagement for, and sometimes it gives you other options as well depending on the specific task and what's available within your plan and those types of things. So you can kind of go through that, fix it, that's going to update your resource plan. Resource manager is going to get notified, hey, you made some changes, they'll approve those, it'll go back, and then you'll be good to go to continue to use those on all of your particular tasks and such. So that kind of gives you a hint and ties the two together from a project manager perspective, so you can see, where your resources are available and such, or been approved to work with you on that type of thing. Cool. All right. So then jumping back in here, that's kind of the whole process of how it's going to happen. But what we also have then is some different reports that we can take a look at. And these reports are going to give us visibility into the resource information and let us make better decisions, see what's going on, and see how we did. Are we planning properly or not? That type of a thing as well. So this particular report that I'm looking at is within Power BI. We have a report pack of about 30 or 35 different reports within Power BI that allow you to look at all types of information around Project Online, everything from schedules to timelines to status reports, etc., those types of things. But one set of reports we have is these resource reports. This particular one is showing me per project. Each of these colors here is a different project, so we can see if there's a big color, that project's taking up a lot of our resources, that type of a thing. And it stacks them, and then it shows a line here for the amount of availability that these resources as a whole have. And I can zoom in on different groups of resources, like I just want to look at my developers, for example. I can come and I can zoom into just those and just focus on my developers and the work that they're working on. Or I can just look at specific resources or specific projects, whatever I want to do within here. But I can see you know what, looking into the end of the year here, we're scheduled to do a lot more work. Our resources are being asked a lot more than they have availability to do, is what this is telling me, right? We're way over this line here. So what we need to do is figure out which projects we're going to do, and we need to kind of cut some out, that type of a thing. But another thing that you can do within here is this is actually a drill-in report. So right now I'm looking at it by month, but I go, you know what, in October, man, we have a ton of work. I want to see really what's going on at a more detailed level. I can click into that, and now it's going to show me by day what's going on. So I can see, well, it looks like most of the work is towards the end of the month. Which projects are going on in that period of time and taking the most time? I can see it's like this e-commerce portal development project and the dynamic CRM, and we can start to look into those and get some visibility into what's going on and maybe make some changes and figure out if we can push those projects out or whatever it might be. So you have some nice reporting options here. If you want a higher level, I want to look at it by quarter, you can do that. You can zoom out and go all the way to the yearly level to see what's going on from a year-by-year basis. So you can really see it at whatever level that you want and flip within, you know, very quickly to the different views and see that different level of detail. So that's kind of a nice report, and there's a bunch of other ones that have some other details. One in particular that I'd like to show today, though, is, oops, if I type it in there right, is a report that compares the engagements versus the actual scheduled work, and then versus the actual work that gets done, either from timesheet hours or if you're just keying in actuals, that type of a thing. So what we're looking at here is for these two resources, but we could select more resources, or we could select all resources if we wanted to. We could see this red line is showing me the amount of committed work. Committed work is that engagement. We originally created that engagement and then it was committed, meaning it was approved, that type of a thing. And it shows me this line here. So for each month, and again I could zoom in and zoom out for quarters or for days or, you know, at whatever level I want to look at that. But for each month I can see how much work was committed for that resource. Then I can come over here and I can see the task work, which is the amount of scheduled work. So we committed this much work, but then the project managers went and built all the project schedules that this person's working on, and they actually assigned them twice as much work. So we have a problem there, right? That type of a thing. So we can start to see where those variances are over the different months. Then this other guy here is showing me the task actual work. So as the resource is actually putting actual hours on their tasks, or as the project manager is keying in the actuals for them, either way, we can see those hours building up and then compare that against the scheduled work and also against the engagement. So this allows you to really see how well you're planning. Well, we originally planned this, then we went back and did some detailed planning and it was twice as much, but then we actually only spent this. So, you know, you can kind of use this to get an idea of, are we keeping on track with what we said we're going to do? Are we planning properly? And if not, we can start to look into that and figure out what's going on and maybe improve our planning process so we're more accurate in the future, that type of a thing. Down below then we have details of all this information, where it's coming from, you know, which projects these resources are working on and which tasks that they're working on, where all that time is estimated to go, you know, that type of a thing. Cool. So there's lots of other reports in here, but those are some of the kind of key ones that I wanted to touch on today, some of the ones that people find particularly valuable when working through this whole resource management process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Bridget, and I think we're going to see if there are any questions on the line, and if not, then we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions, and I apologize. I also had a request here for you to slow down a bit, which I didn't see until now. So if there's anything in particular that you would like Matt to show again, please let us know. But we do have a couple questions. The first one says, where are resource managers defined?
Great question, great question. So if I go back into the actual resource pool here, when you set up a particular resource, you can define who the resource manager is for that resource. So you can do that, you know, across all the resources of a particular role or a particular department. Say, here's the resource manager for that type of a thing. So it's all defined when you put that resource in. You say who the resource manager is, basically.
Okay, and that actually answers the next question, I think, which is, where is the mapping of resources to their manager created? Is that a pull from ADFS?
Not a pull from ADFS. There is an Active Directory sync you can do to get these resources in here, but ADFS is more for the authentication side of things. But I can show you guys here. If I come down, I can see who, which department I'm part of, who my resource manager is, lots of different information like that. So that's where that resource manager comes from. If you had that in Active Directory, technically you could sync it in. Generally, most people don't store resource managers in Active Directory, but if you did, for sure you could do that. Cool.
Okay, so the next one is, how is the maximum capacity determined in the reports? Number of resources times full-time hours, question mark?
It's a little bit more complex than that. It accounts for holidays and the work hours and that percentage that I showed. So if I pop back into one of these resources here, there's lots of different information that you set up around each particular resource, or can anyway, you don't have to. But based off of things like the calendar that I'm using, so it'll take into account holidays. So if there's a holiday on a certain particular day, then your availability for that day is 0, and it'll use that in the calculations, that type of a thing. If you're only part-time, or if some of your time is gone to admin activities, if you're only 75% available, it takes that away from your availability. You can also account for operational work in here, and I didn't really talk about that, but you could have basically operational type projects where you go and you say, this person's on this operational work, say 50% of their time, and that'll take away another 50% of their time. So, using all of those different options with holidays, etc., their work hours, how much they're available, it's going to then look at the amount of days per month, how many hours you're available each day, and calculate it all up so you can see per this month or per this quarter, this is how available that person is. But then once you start getting, requested for different projects and that's approved, it's going to take away from that availability across all of your projects, right? It's looking at everything that you're working on and figuring out then how much do you have left, that type of thing.
Okay, next question. Can resources be synchronized with Active Directory on-premise of Microsoft Online Directory services? If yes, can additional fields be added in addition to what is synced from AD?
Yeah, it depends on your networking. So I will say it depends. From a technology perspective, yes, you can sync your resources in from Active Directory and you do a little field mapping of which fields go from where to where, that type of a thing. But let's say you were using Project Online and your Active Directory was behind a firewall and they weren't willing to open that firewall so that the connection could happen. That would not work. So it just depends on the networking between those. As long as that Project Online or Project Server, if you're using that system, can connect to that Active Directory, it has networking access to do so, then yes, you'd be able to do that.
Okay. Have you seen any companies leverage Office 365 APIs to pull resource data into a data warehouse rather than using built-in reporting?
Yes, I definitely have seen that, and we actually, Tivity has an app that allows you to take all this data and send it out to a SQL database, which in essence could be your data warehouse. We also have integration connectors as part of our Project Connect platform that allow you to integrate with other sources, whatever those might be. That's sometimes other different tools that can be data warehouses, can be whatever necessary, that type of a thing. But if you did want to send all that data out into a data warehouse and then kind of join it up with some other data, you could. What I will say, though, is with tools like Power BI, some of the more modern reporting tools, you don't have to push all that data into a data warehouse. The modern reporting tools allow you to create what's called a data model. And that data model can connect into multiple different data sources and join all that data together. You would need something to join it together with, like a project ID or a resource ID, something unique that's the same in those different systems. And then once you've joined that together in the model, you can report off of it, say in Power BI like I was showing, or other different tools of that nature. But if you did need to get it into a data warehouse for whatever reason, yes, there are definitely APIs and connectors and such available to use to do that.
Okay, so here's a clarification. I think we didn't answer the actual question. Where is the resource manager created? Are they created at the time that you identify them as the individual a resource rolls into?
Yeah, a resource manager is created just like any other resource. So you'd come into the resource pool, you'd hit new resource, you'd create that person associated to the proper account, that type of a thing. And from that point on, basically anyone who's in the resource pool is available to be used as a resource manager for another resource, that type of a thing.
Okay. I think this next one probably we need to take offline. It says, can you provide specifics on how to set up Power BI Dataset? So that's something that you can reach out. I'm about to put up some contact information, so you can reach out separately on that one.
For sure.
Dashboard and reports. Oh, hold on, that's still part of that same question. I've always found the response rate online is slow and gets slower the larger the schedule is. How can we get the system to react quicker?
I guess it depends what tool you're using. It sounds like you might be using the online planner, although maybe you're using Project Desktop, that type of a thing. You shouldn't experience any slownesses with amounts of data because it pages through the data, but if you are, we can look into it and try to troubleshoot that with you and figure out what's going on. Sometimes it's not always the system, sometimes it's your computer and maybe incompatibilities with your browser or different settings that you can set, things like that, especially if your company has different group policies or if you're connecting over a VPN. I mean, it can be a wide range of reasons. It's not necessarily just the system. If it is the system, though, it's definitely something we can open up a ticket with Microsoft with and get some support and figure out what's going on and how we can get it resolved.
Okay, when a resource manager commits to an engagement, the Gantt chart does not directly pick up the assignment. The project manager still needs to make the assignment. Is this correct?
That is correct, yeah. So engagements and task assignments are two different things. They're kind of separate. However, there was some relation that I showed there. But that's correct. So you would go out and you'd say, I need this resource for a specific period of time. You might not even have a project schedule created yet. If you do, I mean, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with having that. But generally, you'd create your high-level resource plan with those generic resources. Then you would get some resources given to you. Then you'd go out and build out your project schedule and you would assign them to each particular task, that type of thing. There wouldn't be any particular way to know like which resource should go on which task automatically. That's something that you would still have to plan into your schedule yourself.
Right.
Hey, Matt.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Just to elaborate on that, I think one thing to note, and I don't know if you covered it already, Bridget, but there is a way to calculate the demand from both the engagements or from the engagements or from the schedule or from a time frame, right?
For sure, and I can even show that here. So when you're in the resource plan view or other views for that matter, you can come in and I can show here is what's being proposed or being asked for, and then I can actually see the amount of work then scheduled for that particular resource. Some of these resources have work already scheduled within my project here, and then you can compare those to each other. And I'm looking at it in percents. I'd probably look at it in work instead of percents.
And Matt, if you insert the proposed work there, you can actually, one of the things I mentioned in the slide, you can actually copy from the work row into the proposed work. So you can actually take from the work above, you can copy that and then put it into the request row. So that makes it easy to just grab it directly.
For sure. All right. Any other questions?
Yes. In our organization, the project managers are resource managers. Is there a good way for the project manager to quickly and easily identify the resource availability of all resources that could fill the specific role within the project plan itself?
Yeah. When you go in and when you build your team initially for a particular project, it'll show you right there when you're building your team how available each resource is within that particular period of time. So you can kind of stay away from the people that are already overbooked in that particular situation and stick to the people that have some availability within that period of time. So right when you come in and you go into your resource and you're going to build team from the enterprise resource pool, it's going to show you in there people's availability. There's a little checkbox that you have to check, but once you check that, it'll show you everyone's availability right there.
Okay, rather than deal with hundreds or thousands of hours, we enter in chart time in monthly FTEs. This unit appears to have been removed from the resource plan, moving to engagements.
No, the FT was the percent that I showed, so if I switch it back in here to committed max units and get rid of these other guys. Did I do that wrong? Proposed max units, I'm sorry, they're not committed yet. So when we were putting in percents, that's basically your FTEs, right? Here's 1 FT, there's 0.5 FTs, that type of a thing. It just doesn't show it as a number, it shows it as a percent, but essentially it's the the same thing there. Cool.
Okay, so that's it. I'm going to grab the control back so I can put up some contact information.
Sounds good.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we appreciate you all being here. If you'd like to talk in more detail about your particular situation, we do offer a free assessment and roadmap to help you get to where you want to be. You can contact the email address there. Also, there's some specific email addresses for both Matt as well as Michelle. And then we have 2 additional upcoming webinars. So on May 3rd, we'll have the Unified Microsoft Agile and PPM Solution, Project Online and Visual Studio Team Services. So this is for those of you that have been struggling with the combination of having some projects in Agile and some projects in Waterfall, and how do we cope with that. So if that's something that hits home for you, please join us. And then on May 11th, identifying your best portfolio of projects with Project Online. So this will go through some of the portfolio management features. And with that, I think that's it. So thank you all very much.